Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews. My name is Talissa. You can tell I'm a Vulcan female because I spell my name with a T and apostrophe. It's the only logical way for Vulcan women to spell their names. We are going to have a most logical discussion about Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3. But joining me is a most illogical human full of human emotions, Mark from Enchantment of Eternity. Say hello, Mark.
Hello, everyone. How's it going? And I'm not just Mark, I'm bold Mark. I'm always going to say yes to everything. Yes to this.
You see, he is full of emotions. Okay, that's enough of the Vulcan thing. I can't do that with the Vulcan thing might come in a little bit here and there. But Lower Decks is a show you definitely have to have human emotions because we're going to talk about things that really made me laugh. Um, we're going to talk about things that made us laugh. We're going to talk about things that made us cry. We're going to talk about some heartfelt moments with the characters. And in the case of one episode, for me personally, anger is an emotion that I felt. So um, a lot of emotions. So I guess consider me a Romulan for the rest of this. I mean, really, these are elf ears, but whatever, close enough. All right. Um, just want to say hello to Maddie Jester and Norman Buckwald in the chat. Good for joining me, or joining us rather. We've got just gonna check real quick what you guys are talking about. Maddie says lower deck points. Captain Freeman is awesome. One of my favorites. Kind of scared of the koala bear thing. Can't wait for the Stranger Worlds crossover. Yeah, I'm really interested in that. Norman says, I still think Rutherford needs some character development, although what happened in the season helps, given that resolving what was being done to him so neatly was a bit disappointing. Oh, we got Stephen Kennedy saying hello. Hello, Stephen. Um, uh, I seem to like the episode I think you're talking about, Alyssa. But that's fine. Some people like it. We'll get to it. So this is going to be the format. We're going to, for each, give our overall thoughts on the season, and then we're each going to name some of our least favorite episodes of the season, the ones that we didn't like as much, and then we'll name some of the ones that we did like, our favorite episodes of the season. And then if there's anything else we want to touch on after that, we'll go ahead and do that. And if there's time, we might do more things, but we'll see what the time is looking like after we get through that piece of it. So yeah, we'll talk about my least favorite episode. I generally feel like, although no one hated it as much as I did, like the reviews for it were, people weren't as high on it as other episodes, so I don't feel too much. Okay, Stephen Kennedy is on my side because that is the same episode that I hated. Okay, anyways, let's go ahead and start with our overall thoughts. Mark, would you give your logical thoughts of this, or your illogical thoughts of this season? Let's. What are your feelings and thoughts?
I will give my bold thoughts of this season.
Of course, the bold thoughts from Bold Markler. Bold Markler.
And I did already sit down and record my review for season 3, and as I was recording it, I realized that I like this season. This is my favorite season of Lower Decks. I think, to me, this is the most consistently good. It didn't have as many sort of average, kind of boring, kind of filler episodes. And the episodes that are good, I think, are really, really good. And throughout, I think all four of them, the main characters or main lower deckers, had great character arcs. And I talked about last year after season 2 that my fear was that these characters would become stagnant and would get tired seeing Boimler be a kiss ass and Mariner be like a prankster and apathetic and not give a shit, and how they needed to develop Rutherford and Tindy more, and they actually addressed all that. Like, they changed Boimler to the bold Boimler, which as you can tell I was a fan of, and they addressed Mariner and made her realize the ways of her behavior, and they developed Rutherford and Tindy more, especially Rutherford, and through that we had a lot of hilarious, funny jokes and good character stories, and they took risks one of them didn't pay off so much, but at least they did. And so yeah, and so I would say that I'm really happy with the season. I'm really looking forward to next season.
Yeah, the same. I actually do want to respond to what Norman said. I kind of disagree. Like, I mean, I guess they all still need character development technically, but I think they really went a long way with character development for Rutherford. I felt satisfied. That was one of the things that I was really looking for in this season. I had said previously, like, Rutherford kind of needs to catch up with the other three as far as character development. And I thought they did a good job. So I really agree with you. This is definitely my favorite season of Lower Decks. I think it was the most consistent. Um, I it's hard for me to like. I have to go back and watch the other seasons to really compare what I see as the best episodes of this season compared to the best episodes of season two. I think they're on par with each other in my opinion, but I do think you're right. There were less mediocre, kind of filler episodes. And it was just more consistent. Now it does have one episode that I consider the worst episode of the series, but even that does not prevent this overall. I just look at that as one black mark on an otherwise amazing season. So that does not alter my opinion that this is the best season of Lower Decks. All the things you said are true. Like, we got all the character development I was looking for, and a lot of really tender moments, a lot of really heartfelt moments, as well as usual, really laugh out loud moments, which is on par for the course for Lower Decks. I would expect no less, but just I thought there was more great character moments, great tender moments between the characters. More so than other seasons. It was a really emotional season for me. Like, I thought they did such a great job when they ended with all the characters was such a good place to end all the characters, and I'm looking forward to season four. I think there's still room for the show to get even better, and it has gotten better. So I think it's going to continue to. So I think I'm really excited for the next season of Lower Decks. I don't know if I said that before or felt that way before, but I'm genuinely excited for this almost as much as I am excited for Strange New Worlds season two. So yeah, definitely a great season of television.
I think I can say with a lot more confidence now that this is the second best of the newer Star Trek shows. That before I always put little asterisks on it. Well, it's a comedy show, like it's good for a comedy show, but I think that asterisk is gone. I'll flat out say like this is better than Picard, Discovery, and Prodigy.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, yeah, I don't even know if I even never had the asterisks. I think before Strange New Worlds, I would just flat out say this is my favorite Star Trek show of
Yeah.
the modern era. But now, even with Strange New Worlds, I think because this one has gone a little farther, this one's on the third season. Um, I don't know. It's hard to compare because this isn't season three. Strange New Worlds is season one. I almost think this is a little bit even better than Strange New Worlds. I think they're kind of, uh, neck and neck. But I also think the fairest thing is going to be to compare Strange New Worlds season three to Lower Deck season three, which is probably going to be vastly superior at the rate that Strange New Worlds is going. But both of them are definitely my two favorite that I adore both of them. Um,
Mm.
but I don't think the last season I left. I'm excited for season three. Now this year I'm excited for season four. Like, I'm really looking forward to it. Um,
Oh yeah, so Stephen Kennedy says Strange New World rocks, except for one episode that everyone seems to love. Curious what episode you're talking
yeah,
about
which one are
because
you talking about?
there's one that me and Alyssa love that everyone else seems to hate, so it can't be that episode.
Yeah, and the one that you and I love the most is not people don't hate it, but it's like not.
Nah.
Yeah, um, and I
Well,
agree
no,
with
I was.
Norm.
Oh,
I
Strange
agree
New
with
Worlds
Norman
probably has.
that
Yes,
Strange New
the
Worlds is
best
probably
first
his best first
season.
season. Yeah,
Yeah, of any.
for
Well,
sure.
that's not a high bar.
Yeah,
I
yeah, that
think
isn't a
previous.
hyper.
For me, it was Voyager before, but I think this
Yeah,
is clearly better than season one of
yeah.
Voyager. But the fantasy one, yeah, everyone hates that one except for me and Alyssa. That's what it
Yeah, what do you
seems
mean
like
people
to me.
love it? It has the lowest rating on IMDb. Like everyone hates it.
Yeah,
Like only me and
yeah.
Mark are the only ones who actually do love it. So I don't know what you're talking about.
I wish more people would like that episode. It was so
Yeah,
good. It was so
I think
touching at the end.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think Norman hates that episode too, if I remember
yeah.
correctly.
Well, next month I'm doing my overrated and underrated episode list, and that will definitely be somewhere on my underrated list
Oh,
because
I
that.
forgot to put it on my underrated list. God dang it. Oh well.
Anyways, so let's talk about the episodes. I want to start with our least favorites, and I'll go first because I have
Yes, you
stronger
go
feelings
first.
about an episode in this season than I think you have of any particular episode. So, my least favorite episode of the season and the entire series is A Mathematically Perfect Redemption, which was episode 7 of the 3rd season. Okay, so as we've talked about before, there's been a lot of great moments with characters, a lot of great character development. I really am feeling the characters this year. So I'm not totally opposed to putting all of those wonderful characters and wonderful character development and great moments aside for an episode. They did it in season 2 with Wage Douche, which I liked. It worked. But in Wage Douche, there was interesting characters that they put our main characters aside for, interesting stories, and actually character growth. So we put aside the wonderful season. We had just come off what still is probably the best episode of the season, or one of the best episodes of the season, which we'll talk about later. They had just come off of that. I'm feeling really good. I'm really loving these characters, and they put the characters aside in favor of a character that we only met once in season 1 that I personally find to be really annoying. But I would have come out okay of this episode. I probably would have given it like a 5 or a 6 rating if they hadn't pulled the rug out from under us with the character growth that Peanut Hamper seemed to have, where she seemed to have a redemptive arc. She seemed to figure things out. And yes, that would have been cliche. And if they had gone with that, I probably would have gone on my review and said, well, that's a little bit cliche and just a little tropey. So I'm only giving this a 6. But I gave it a 3 because they pretended that there was actual character growth. And they said, no, just kidding. This is still the most obnoxious one-dimensional character ever. There's no character growth at all. It's just the same character. Nothing has grown. Nothing has changed. Ha, ha, ha. Isn't that funny? No, this is what angered me. This is why I would never be able to do this whole review as a Vulcan because there's anger with this with that just pissed me off. That was just like a big middle finger to the fans. Like, we are putting aside all this wonderful lovely character development that we did with the characters you love so that we could have this obnoxious character that has no character growth, and we're going to pretend that she has character growth and then pull the rug out from under you. So I know that not everyone feels as strongly against this episode as I do, although I do feel like, most people were like you in the 5 or 6 range, like it wasn't one of their favorites. But that's what just really irritated me. Thankfully, they recovered from it. Episodes 8 and 10 were both fantastic. 9 was pretty decent as well. So it's just one black mark in the season. But but this episode just really angered me. And I personally don't need to see Peanut Hamper again. Although I wouldn't mind it, though, if they're going to have her team up with the Jeffrey Combs supercomputer, I could probably deal with it and just have her be a flat out villain. I might actually be able to deal with her a little bit more. But yeah, I did not like this episode. So what are your thoughts, Mark?
Yeah, so I also did not like this episode. This is also what I had listed as my least favorite episode of the season, but I don't think it's my least favorite of the show. It might be in the bottom 5 of the show, but I was kind of into this episode. I wouldn't have minded. You talked about the horrible ending, and if it wasn't for that ending, I'd probably give this episode like a 7, maybe even a 6 or a 7, maybe a 7. But because of that ending, I think I gave it a 4 if I remember correctly. Yeah, because that ending, like, rendered, as you said, it rendered the whole episode pointless. It's like, yes, it would have been cliche had they done that, stuck with it. But I talked about in my review how I feel like they should have come up with a better twist. They could have had a twist that was different, that made it not normal cliche, but not a twist that completely undid everything and rendered all this character, like, we had an entire episode of character development. Look at how she's growing. Nah, psych, just kidding. She was never growing. So why the fuck did we waste our time with this? What, like, I don't like it's. To me, that was just bad writing. I could almost imagine writers in the room being like, "Oh, wouldn't it be funny if we made her evil at the end?" Yeah, let's do that without giving any consideration about wait, but why? Why are you showing us this episode then? Like, what's the point? I was impressed at first with the way it opened, with like the melancholic music and the flashback to the season 1 finale, and saying, "Oh, this is what this character went on," and so I was with it. And then the Bird Society, I think they did a good job. I actually did find some of the humor in that, like when she was like, when there was like, "Oh, there's a sky snake," and it's like, well, if everything on this planet flies, then why you bother calling it a sky snake? Why did you start calling it a snake? Like, that to me was calling out like tropes and other Star Trek and sci-fi, which is what Lower Decks is good at. So there were like good humorous moments within these, within this, and developing this alien species and hyper focuses on it. But yes, the ending ruined everything. And I just think it was a terrible ending. And I agree. The only like light about this episode is the having Artemis reappear, the supercomputer voiced by Jeffrey Combs. And yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing Peanut Hamper again if she was with Artemis. And if Artemis was the focus and they both came back as supervillains, I'd be fine with, because they've now established her as the supervillain. But hopefully they wouldn't do a whole episode about her going through a character growth that is undone at the end. Like, that's just bad writing, plain and simple.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could deal with her just being presented as the straight up villain that she is, and not pretending that there's character growth that there's really isn't. Um, I want to address in the chat. Norman says there's critics that are harsher on it than me. I haven't heard of any of them. I seem to be the harshest one that I've ever seen, but I'm sure they exist, maybe. But I'm pretty harsh on it. So I thought I was being nice, giving it a 3, but maybe there's people who would give it a 1. I don't know.
No, so Norman is saying in the quote above that there's a few people declaring it the worst episode of all of Star Trek.
Well,
That
I mean, maybe they think more highly of some of the really bad episodes than other bad episodes than they do. Like, maybe they don't think Proper Place or Code of Honor are as bad as I think they do. But
not with God, the Scottish Condal. Leave her alone. Episodes like that exist.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I mentioned this before, but I was watching Trek Culture, and Sean Ferrick was being a little harsh on that episode. He was probably harsher on that episode than he was on any other episode, but not as harsh as I was. And then I read the comments, everybody's like, "Oh, what's wrong with you, Sean? You're just being too negative." Like, the comment saying, like, Sean is being rainbows and sunshine compared to what I think. Like, this episode is the worst of the series. But yeah, it does just represent bad writing. And I guess the really frustrating thing for me, again, is that we came off of one of the best episodes of the season, possibly up there as one of the better episodes of the series, and I was feeling good about the show, and it's just such great character interactions, character moments, character development all season long, and then we're putting all of that aside for for a character that gets no character growth. So it just really angered me. So
I will say I did like Peanut Hamper in her first appearance in the season 1 finale. And so when they were like, "We're gonna have this whole episode about her," I was like, "I'm with it. I'll see where you go." And as I said, if they gave it a better ending, I might have actually really liked this episode.
Yeah. I think the ceiling for this episode to me was probably 5 or 6 out of 10. Like I wouldn't have hated it as much, but yeah. Yeah, now the chat is listing off a bunch of bad episodes. So do you have anything else to say on this one, or you want to move on, Mark?
No, I think we pretty much crunched it. Yeah.
Now maybe there's not another one that you hate as much as I hate that one, but are there any other ones that you would say you liked a little less, that were a little?
So there is. Yeah, there is only one other episode I would put in the sort of worst in the season category, because once we get past this episode, then it's all solid, like 7 out of 10 episodes. So the only episode that gets less than a 7 gets a 6. So it's still a positive rating for me, but I still would say is one of the weaker episodes of the season was that Room for Growth episode. And I think this is the one that had the subplot with the engineers going to the relax station, and that whole subplot, I just didn't like it. It felt cliche, and I knew how the people would react, and I knew it would end up. The engineers kept trying to engineer. It's like it was a by the numbers thing that I didn't really find very funny, and the crawling through the ship to like, and there's like weird like algae and stuff trying to kill him, like that just seemed off. I don't know. And I won't even, I guess I could get in my whole complaints. I've talked about this before about how I don't buy they all sleep in the hallway, but I've learned to live with it because it's Lower Decks is a comedy. But I don't like episodes that focus on that because I don't like that aspect of it. And so yeah, this episode had a lot of against it, but it wasn't terrible. Like I did think the scene where they were all like hallucinating high as fuck was funny. And there's a few other moments I think were funny, but yeah, this is the only other episode in the season I would say was a little subpar.
Yeah, I definitely like this one more than you. I think I ended up giving it a 7.5 maybe. Because I don't have that thing against them sleeping in the hallway. Like that doesn't bother me as much as it bothers you. I mean, you make good points, but whatever. They sleep in the hallway. Like it's Lower Decks. It's just, I mean, it's a comedy. Yeah. They're trying to like emphasize. Yeah, that part never bothered me. And I guess I wasn't as bothered by the other plot either as you were. I'm trying to think of what my I did have some criticisms for this episode, but I'm trying to remember now. Yeah, I know I did kind of like the I forget what the counselor or whatever. I forget what the hell her name was. She reminded me a lot of the relaxation person. For some reason, she made me think a lot about the. God, now I'm blanking on everything. Those people from the Clone Wars, the people who do the
yes, the Caminos. Is that what they're called?
Yeah, for some reason, like, but I did kind of find it funny how like they were focusing on how Freeman was getting stressed out, but she started getting subtly more. She kind of reminded me a little bit of Airplanes. This was a broad day to quit smoking. And she was and like she would get really irritated. Like I actually found that funnier than Freeman freaking out because it was a little more subtle. So yeah, I didn't hate this episode. I actually had another one ranked slightly below it.
I wouldn't say I hated it. It was just for me one of the weaker. The only other weaker one of this season.
Yeah, I didn't consider it one of the weak ones either, but but I see where you're coming from. I mean, especially with, I know you have that bias against the hallways. And that was an episode about that. One of my complaints was that this competition with the Delta shift was was like exactly the same thing as the competition that they had. Can't remember if it was the episode before or 2 episodes before with the crew of the Carlsbad. But this time
Yeah, it was the episode. It was the direct episod before.
the
Yes,
direct
like at the
episode
same
right
time.
after
Yeah.
it. And I was like, didn't we just do this last week? So that kind of bothered me. Yeah, I don't know. But overall, I think I gave it like a 7 or 7.5 or something. So I probably liked it a little more than you did. But I see where you're coming from with it. I think the only other episode at all, this is such a good season. Like,
Yeah.
I think I gave other than the Peanut Hamper episode, I think I gave everything a 7.5 or higher, except for one other episode that I gave a 7 to. So it's still pretty good, which is Grounded, the first episode.
Oh, yes.
Just because, like, I just felt like, I don't know, what was the point of that cliffhanger? The whole point of the cliffhanger is so they could have this gag. So they made us wait all summer to find out what happened, but just to have that gag. And I just felt like, just don't do cliffhangers. So I was actually happy, and I actually gave bonus points to this year's finale that they didn't do a cliffhanger. Like, just I don't know. Sometimes that kind of thing works for me, and sometimes it doesn't, where they're really emphasizing how lower decky everybody is, and like, oh, well, they're not going to save the day because they're just lower deck, so we're just going to have Tuvok and all these off-screen people save the day. And I think that would have played better for me if it wasn't a cliffhanger or waiting all year to see how it was paid off. But I still gave it a 7. I still enjoyed that episode. There's still a lot of funny moments in that episode. So, I mean, I can't even necessarily say it's one of my least favorite. It was just like the only other one that I would think of that I rated a little lower, but I still liked it overall.
Yeah, I agree. Like I'm probably like pretty much in the same place where now that you mentioned it, this episode was a little weaker than the other was, and I completely agree that this would have been fine. It would have been fine for the whole point to be that mariners should just trust in Starfleet, and that better people like Tuvok never could solve anything. If it wasn't a cliffhanger, like making it a cliffhanger it felt like a massive letdown, like a disappointment. And I was like, oh yeah, the cliffhanger actually didn't matter because everything was resolved off screen. I'm like, then why bother leaving us? It did make me feel like the writers didn't know they were going to do that when they created the cliffhanger and just kind of couldn't find a way to solve it. I was like, oh, let's just say it all happened off screen. But it wasn't a terrible episode. I still enjoyed it. You get great character moments with Mariner coming to terms with her, realizing that she needs to chill and not to like be so angry about everything, and that she can't solve everything. Sometimes it's just out of your hands, and you just got to let other people handle it. So that was a good storyline, and the camaraderie between the four characters, I think, was shown very nice in this episode.
Yeah.
But the side plot with that one guy who was like in that like amusement park ship, it was like, I'm gonna be an explorer. Like, I didn't find that funny at all. I was just like, what's the point of this? This is kind of dumb. And I also wasn't a huge fan of the whole. I didn't hate it, but I wasn't like crazy about the whole Zephyr and Cochrane Land or whatever the amusement park was. I didn't like some of the, like a lot of Trek reviewers like, oh my god, this looks so great on. And I was just like, I didn't really care about that either way.
I was probably in between those 2 points of view. Like I wasn't like, I don't like it. I know, but I wasn't like super excited about it either. I thought it was fun. But I want to address in the chat Norman saying, well, there sort of was a cliffhanger with the post-credits Badgie scene. That's not a cliffhanger. That would be like the post-credit scene in the Avengers where like there's Thanos smiling at the screen. Like that's not a cliffhanger, because that's just something.
It's a tease.
It's a tease is the word, because cliffhanger is something that needs to be resolved in the very next episode. Like it. Yeah. You can't go beyond the next episode without resolving it. A tease is something that you can get to whenever you feel like it.
So this specific cliffhanger, like unless you want to write Captain Freeman off the show, or at least write her off for several episodes, you need to resolve this immediately.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And that's what cliffhangers are. Like they have to be resolved immediately. Whereas a tease, you can address that anytime in the future, whenever you want to.
Yeah, what did the Thanos thing? They took like 8 years or something to address
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. All right. Shall we move on?
Yeah, sure.
Let's talk about. I think in the end we might end up talking about most of the episodes, but let's talk about our favorite episodes. And this time I'll start with you, Mark. Um, which of your favorite episodes would you like to talk about first, or do you have one that you would say is your definitive favorite episode?
Yes, I will say and I've given this some thought. My definitive favorite episode of the season is the Hear All, Trust Nothing, the D Space Nine episode, because it's not only am I a huge D Space Nine fanboy and how like just utter happy I was to see them actually paying service to Deep Space Nine, going to Deep Space Nine, seeing Kira and Quark and Quark's bar and the Karma, which were an alien that appeared in Deep Space Nine. The character stories in the storylines were all great. Like each of the subplots were all like really good. And seeing like the way Kira and Quark played off our main characters. And especially, I love the whole Shax thing with with Kira when he's trying to like, no, I owe you one, no, you owe me one. Like that was absolutely great. But then even the subplots it's like very important, like probably one of the most important episodes for Tendi that really explored her sort of shame over being an Orion, how she doesn't want to bring it up, and how she meets this Orion Starfleet officer who, to me, it reminded me a lot of Worf, because they were raised on Earth and they go out of their way to like embrace their native culture, and to an extreme that people who actually are from that culture don't even do. And I love how they kept that as a reveal, because at first he's like, oh yeah, I'm a pirate, let's sing the pirate songs, la la la, and then it was revealed at the end of the episode, oh, I'm from Ohio. Like that was, and then that Tendi was actually the real pirate, because she grew up being a pirate, but it's not the life she chose, and it's something that she wants to kind of distance herself, and she hates the cliche and stereotype that his thing was just reminding her of. But then when she realized that he just wanted to connect with his own culture, and they sort of came together, and I thought that was a really powerful story. And then you also got I guess we can get into the whole Mariner and Jennifer thing, because there's been a whole criticism about how they were underutilized this season, which I agree. And I think the solution is to delve into this relationship more, not just write her off the show. That's just my opinion. But this is the one episode that actually does delve into the relationship, and it's good. Like, this is why I want to see more of it, because when they do show it, it's a really fascinating relationship. How Mariner thinks she needs to impress Jennifer's friends, but then finds out that Jennifer actually brought Mariner there to tell them all off, and seeing her going around shooting all of them with the phaser was hilarious. And so, yeah, this may be in contender for one of my favorite episodes of the entire show, but I hadn't given it that much thought yet. But it's definitely my favorite of the season.
Yes, I agree. Definitely my favorite of the season as well. Little surprised to see it there, because of the previous two seasons, my favorite episodes always came at the end. And right here at episode six, I think in the past had been something mediocre or below average. I don't remember which the episode six were in the previous two seasons, but I was really hit with a delightful surprise with this episode. I'm right there with you, fangirling out on Deep Space Nine, and as Norman, or was Maddie, sorry, in the chat mentioned, Morn was there when they showed Morn. They walked by Morn. I was like, yes, Morn! I was like so happy to see Morn sitting at the bar. Yeah, and Quark was so Quark. Kira was so Kira, and it just Kira. I mean, I remember when Riker was on, like they kind of lower decked him a little bit, like made him a little sillier. I feel like they did that a little bit with Kira, but Quark was just straight up Quark because Quark was already kind of a little silly. So I love this episode so much, and I agree with everything you said about the character development. The Tendi story, I think this might be my favorite Tendi Tindy story that they've done. I actually like the one in episode 8 as well, but that was more of a B plot. I guess this was more of a B plot too. But I this plot really stood out to me. To me, it was a really beautiful moment of her like realizing that her pirate past is a part of who she is, and like this is not a part that she needs to reject anymore. That she should accept that is a part of her whole being. And to me, that's really beautiful, especially being a trans person. That is something that like we kind of go through, like whether how much we accept or reject our past selves. And like I think it's beautiful to come to an acceptance of the part of you that you're little more ashamed of is actually a part of who you are too. And it's a little not exactly the same thing, but a little bit of a kind of a tangentially related to what Picard comes to realize in Tapestry. It's different, but it's kind of a similar like part of my past that I was ashamed of or rejected is actually very much a part of my whole being, and I think that they did it amazingly well. And as far as the Mariner and Jennifer of it all. Yeah, I do wish they did more of this. I thought that this was very sweet. Jennifer, and then told us Jennifer is a little sadistic, which I would find, that's gives us a little more character development there. I thought they had a very sweet moment at the end. My feeling with Jennifer moving forward is, if they're going to have them get back together, then they need to actually have them together. If they're not going to bother, then just have her move on from Jennifer, honestly, and have her move on to someone else. So I'm not opposed to them being back together in the future, but they need to actually do more of things like this episode, if they're going to have them back together. I also feel like Jennifer was extremely unfair to Mariner in episode 9, that was. So I feel like they need to mend that if they're going to get back together. If I were Mariner, I would kind of just move on personally, the way she treated her in episode 9. But that's a different episode we're talking about now.
I think that would make an interesting storyline for me personally.
Yeah.
Is how does Jennifer make it up to the Mariner?
And if they're going to actually dive into that, then yes. But I don't want them to.
But I want them to dive into that. I'd rather they dive into it than forget about it.
Yeah, well,
but you're right. I don't want them to half-ass it either.
I don't want them to just magically be back together again with no explanation, and then we only see them together like once every 5 episodes or something. And
that would be terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. If they're going to do that again, then just have them break up. But so if they're going to actually have them together still, then have them together. Like really explore it. But I'm going off on a tangent of something that doesn't have to do with this episode, because this episode they did a really good job of it. They did a really good job of everything. Somebody mentioned in the chat that they even enjoyed the Boimler C plot, which I did as well.
I forgot about that. Yeah,
I think it's kind of like a D plot, really.
Yeah, really, it was. But it was because they didn't show much of it, but it was great how his boldness was actually paying off for him in this episode. He made all this money, and he was like, and then Ferengi is trying to snivel his way. Hey, how about you just give up all that useless Latinum and take these gift certificates? He's like, yeah, sure. I don't even use Latinum. They're like, what? Like, that was hilarious.
Yeah, and I didn't even notice at first, but there's a scene at the end with him like holding all of this like like junk memorabilia and stuff that he got from the gift shop. It's really funny. This was just such a great episode. And I agree with the Kira and the Shax thing was so good. Like plays off of I feel like I can't remember which particular episodes, but there was at least one episode where Kira did kind of have a mini kind of interaction with one of her former people, her former terror, whatever you call those people, where it was just like, oh, you saved me, no, I saved you, and then it kind of stopped. But here they like really exaggerated it.
Yes, I can't remember that dude's name, but he had like one arm. He was like this big.
Yeah. Yeah, they just did what Lower Decks does well, which is really exaggerate and make it really funny.
And it was just really. Sorry, I was just gonna say I really got the impression that None of us was having so much fun, like listening
Yeah,
to it.
absolutely. I'm sure that she was like being back in that role again and getting to do it in this format. I'm sure she was having a blast. It was I was having a blast with it. This is this. I remember when my initial review for it, my initial reaction was, I don't know if I can say it's one of my favorite episodes of the series. I am revisiting that as the more it sits with me. I think it might be. um, some point soon, I would actually just like to rewatch the whole series again because there's other videos that I watch will point out these Easter eggs, like Towel Guy and like the Delta Shift was in season one. I don't remember all of those things, so I kind of want to rewatch the whole series, and then I'll have a better idea of what is my favorite episodes of the series. But I do think that this is probably going to be up there. I just I adored this episode so much. All right. Anything else to add on that one? We can move on to the next one.
I was just gonna address in the chat, Manny Jester saying I've met the guy who played Morn in Birmingham years ago. What a nice chap. A bit quiet, but that's to be expected. But I betcha he would be talking your ear off if you were off screen.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, Maddie, you mentioned that in one of my live streams one time, and that is really, really cool. Like that, that's really cool. Yeah, let's see. Let's just see what else people are saying in the chat. Surprise! Norman says surprise. Core conceded his profits as much as he did. Maybe if he decided by Grand Nick is Rob, that he would have been understandable. Yeah, me too. I'm assuming there's never going to be any follow up on that. So yeah. Let's see. Yeah, Steven, there wasn't a trailer that there was a crossover between Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks. That was revealed in Comic Con or Star Trek Day or one of those. Was it Star?
I
One
think
of
it was
those
Comic
things.
Con. Yeah.
Yeah, one of those types of things. Maybe it was New York Comic Con or something. It was something they revealed that. I don't know, but it was. There's been no trailer for it, so we have no idea what that's going to be like. So I'm
Yeah,
really
they're gonna
curious
appear
about
as
that.
in live action. They're gonna have the character actors playing
Has
them in
that been
live action.
confirmed? Because then
I
Anson
thought
Mount,
that's what they isn't that what they said at the
but then
like I
Anson
watched
Mount
the
made a
thing.
joke about you're going to get to see my cartoon self or something like that, and
Well, I heard later that Anson Mount was saying that he misunderstood. He thought it would be a Roger Rabbit situation, with,
but
but
they're going to
that's
be
actually but they're
yeah,
gonna
they're going to
be
be
in
live
live
action.
action. Yeah.
That's going to be really interesting. Just wonder how that's going to work out. Okay. Anyways, let us go ahead and move on. I want to talk about. Um, I'll talk about my second favorite episode of the season because that one was my favorite, um, and it's another one that's like just the more I think about it, the more it just grows on me, and that's Crisis Point Two Paradoxes, um, and having that name, it really had a high bar to live up to because Crisis Point might still be one of my absolute number one of the show. Again, I'm gonna have to go revisit all of these. I think it's that or I Excretus. I think Crisis Point is probably my favorite, um, and I think it only comes a little bit short, and mainly because I do think the Mariner story and that the original Crisis Point is probably my favorite character story of the series. That it was just so powerful, very poignant for that character, and she has grown since that time. But I think it was a real like leap forward for that character. They did it in such an interesting way, in a really hilarious way. Um, but Crisis Point Two, the more I think about it, I think it's on par as far as the humor because they did a lot of sequel parodies. Like there is a Star Trek Two in there, of course, the Star Trek Five thing, and I guess it wasn't all sequels because they did the motion picture as well. But throwing a little Star Trek Generations, and they just did a lot of really great things. And this episode had two separate moments where I had to pause and just so that I could get all my laughter out, because if I didn't pause it, then I would be laughing so long and hard, and I would miss the next lines, and I would miss some of the episodes. So I had to pause it so I could laugh really hysterically. And the first moment of that was when they made the line about the Kelvin universe movies, where Mariner was like, "What are we going to do? Have a movie where it's set in an alternate timeline and we're played by different actors?" And Tendi said something along the lines of, "Well, that wouldn't make any sense." And I was like, "Yes, that doesn't make any sense." Like Marc and I are the only ones in the world who, or there are others. You said you read a critic once who pointed this out, but we're in the minority of just realizing just what a horrible idea that is, and what a terrible movie that is. And I consider one of the most overrated films of all time, not just Star Trek films, but just films in general. And so that line was just like, yes, and it made me cracking up laughing for a few minutes. And then later in the episode, when Freeman says, "Dr. Migliaboo, you have the con." And he's like, "Yes, I have the con." And he's so excited, and he runs to the chair, and he's like, all serious, like, "Mr. Boimler, get a subspace signal out to Mimi." And then when Freeman comes back, like, you see this old bird lady on the screen. It was so funny. And on a side note, I actually think I actually really like this character. I think Dr. Migliaboo. I think they. What's that?
Was that this episode?
Yeah, wasn't that this episode? Was it not?
For some reason, I was thinking it was the next episode, episode 9, but I could be wrong.
Was it? I could be wrong then. Then I could be. I thought I remember thinking that I had 2 moments in this singular episode that
Maybe it was
had
a
me
different
cracking
moment.
Had me cracking up laughing to where I was pressing pause. All right, now you've gotten me second guessing that.
Yeah, because I felt like everything Freeman in this episode was just a holographic character.
Yeah, maybe it was
program.
the next episode.
Yeah, it wasn't when Freeman beamed down with the others to like ransom to the symbiosis planet, and so that's when they put Migley Blue in charge.
Was that it? Yeah, okay, I might be getting my episodes crossed. Well, that was another great moment in this season that had me cracking up. Yeah. I feel like there was a second moment where I had to pause in this episode. Now I gotta remember what it is. Because I do remember feeling like I came out of this episode and there were like 2 moments where I had to pause and just cracking up laughing. But yeah, that makes sense. You might be right. So I just touched on another great moment of the season, different episode. Yeah. But back to this episode, yeah, just had a lot of really great parodies. And although I don't think the Boimler story was quite as strong as the Mariner one was, I still think it was a good story for him, seeing how he reacts to the death of his clone, or the supposed death of his clone. And I thought Tendi had a really good storyline here as well, with her kind of coming to terms of the fact that, she would like to be a captain too. And I think this still works with her pursuit of science. Spock was a science officer and became a captain. I think that those 2 things can coexist. So I don't think that this steps on the toes of the other thing, which is later explored in episode 10, her love of science. So I don't think that those things can't coexist. I thought it was another really good character development for Tendi. And then for me, that B plot with the time travel thing, and just how meaningless it was, and stupid it was, and she was just like, "Oh yeah, I guess that they've changed their minds, and now that they're trying to do this other thing instead." I know that everybody else viewed it this way, and I'm sure it wasn't intended this way, but for me, I took that as a knock on first contact, because that whole stupid thing about the Borg going back in time makes no sense. It's the dumbest time travel thing I've ever heard, but no one else seems to see it that way. But so to me, I found that to be really funny. But yeah, this to me is probably my second favorite episode of the season.
Now I have to ask: was the other moment you had to pause to laugh? Was that when Boimler showed up at that giant creature that was kind of making fun of the god from Star Trek Five, and it was like asking him what the meaning of life was?
I don't think so. I mean, I found that funny, but that
Uh,
wasn't a pause moment.
okay, right,
I think it would have
yeah.
been funnier if Mariner said, "What does God need with his
Yeah.
angels?"
And then they were making fun of the whole Vidra thing where it says Kitty
Yeah,
Hawk is Kitty Hawk from North Carolina, but that makes no sense. What does that have to do with anything?
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but yeah, so I had this listed as my second favorite episode as well. I'm kind of torn between this and my third favorite, which I'll get into. So they're kind of on par, but I kind of gave this the nudge as my second favorite. For all the reasons that you stated, and also the one thing I have to point out is Knick Knack. I fucking love Knick Knack.
Yeah,
I love the whole concept that they explored, where Boimler just goes off and talks to these side characters that the holodeck invented that weren't programmed in, and the holodeck is like kind of improvising with the story because he's choosing to go. And I love how Mariner is like giving him shit for it. It's like, these are NPCs, like they're just flat characters. Why are you bothering with them? But he's like obsessed with it. And they had that character Knick Knack at first, like he was just one of those prophecy people in the background who would constantly just pop up and go Knick Knack. And then he kept doing it over and over again, and finally like broke them out of prison. And it was like Knick Knack. And then there was fighting the dudes and ripped off his shirt. It was like this huge monsters going Knick Knack. Like that was hilarious. I want to
yeah.
see Knick Knack again. I
And
absolutely.
Mariner's like, "Oh, big Knick Knack reveal in the third act."
Oh god, I love that. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I also love the whole how Rutherford was not taking anything seriously, and how that was pissing Tendi off. And when like Dr. Tahana got vaporized, he's like, "Whoa, it smells like burns on here." And Tendi was like getting so pissed at him. But once she explained, like, "Look, I want to be taken seriously as a captain, and it feels like you're not taking me seriously." It's like, "Oh, I was just having fun the holiday. I'd absolutely trust you as a captain." And then from then on out, like totally supports her. Like that was a great character moment. That was a good I was getting sick of them constantly pairing Tendi and Rutherford together, of course, from previous seasons, but this was a good use of them. This is like a nice moment to show the strength of their relationship. And yeah, so on top of these great character moments, this episode was quite funny.
yeah, and I agree. And also, Mariner though wasn't about her. I thought it was really sweet how she was like, at first she's like, "Well, fuck this," and then when she realized that Boimler was, going through that, she was like, "Well, he's my friend, and I gotta go." And I don't know if first season Mariner would have necessarily reacted that way. It
Yes. Yeah.
shows character growth, and I think she's a character that really has shown a lot of growth, and we can talk about that more in another episode. But yeah, I thought this handled all of the characters well. Um, so
Oh,
yeah, I would go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say the other moment with the holodeck thing is how he wrote that love interest, which is kind of making fun of like Carol
Yeah,
Marcus.
yeah,
I feel like it was making more fun of Kelvin Carol Marcus being super hot, and how she was just written to have a love interest, and when Boimler rejected her, she's like, I don't know what to do now, because it
yeah.
was like kind of saying it was a flat love
Yeah,
interest
she's like, I don't know what to do. Her whole point of existence was to be the love interest. Um, yeah, and also they do the Star Trek 2 like graphics thing, and Rutherford's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, those are super cool graphics." Like, that was,
Yeah, making fun of the whole Genesis thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And how the Romulan triplets are making fun of the Duras sisters. Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. It was a good episode. It was one that really snuck up on me, and I remember you in your review did the same thing I did, where it was like by the end of our review, we're like, as I talk through this, I think I like it more.
Yeah,
And I think we
exactly.
each ended
Yeah.
up giving it a 9 because.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, Mark, do you have another episode you would like to talk about?
Yeah, so the other one that I said was kind of on par with this is the finale, The Stars at Night. I actually really loved this episode. Now, this is I talked about in my review. This is another one when I was reviewing it, I ended up liking it more. But it's like, you know what, this episode's actually really good. By the time I got to the end of my review, because it isn't. It's a different kind of comedy. It's not the absurdist kind of obvious comedy that was in episodes like Crisis Point 2, but it was more interwoven into the plot and just how ridiculous it was. That you're gonna have this second contact race, and I pointed out one of my favorite lines of the episode was when Tindy was like, "Oh no, we can't have a starship with daddy issues." Like, I just thought that was funny, but then like they all took it like super seriously, like within the story itself, and that sort of lended a sort of an airplane Naked Gun type feeling to it, which kind of worked for the comedy for me. But again, you had a tremendous character growth in this episode. Yeah, Admiral Buenamigo turned out to be your stereotypical evil admiral, but I feel like it was making fun of that. Like, it was parodying all the evil admirals in Star Trek, but particularly when Freeman called him out, I was like, "You're not just one of those evil admirals." He's like, "Actually, I am." Like, and so I feel like that was like, if it was in a normal Star Trek show, it'd be like, "Oh, not the evil admiral trope again." But here is like making fun of that. So, but it actually worked. And some people saying they were disappointed with the reveal of this is what the deal with Rutherford's implant was. I wasn't. I thought this was actually good payoff. And I actually talked in my review about how I feel like each of the four main characters had their moment to shine. Boimler sort of stood up and was like, "Listen to Shax!" And oh my god, that whole moment where Shax gets the ejector warp core and everyone's just like lined up cheering was so great. Like, I was like cheering, and I thought that was absolutely hilarious. And then of course, Mariner gets her redemption coming in at the end, and I love how she realizes she's not upset with people for treating her like this. She realizes that she kind of earned that from her behavior, and learned that her place is in Starfleet. And that's with the whole thing about her like suspecting that the Petra or whatever was evil, but it turned out it was all funded by Admiral Picard, so it was on board. Like, that was good. And then Rutherford, of course, his whole thing about being the creator of this program, realizing what was happening, and Tindy being the one who like discovered this microbe or whatever, and that's what made them lose the race. But no one was really upset with her. In fact, they realized that kind of personal touch is what they needed and what these automated ships were lacking. So yeah, and the ending where it was all the California class crews all gathered together and cheering and everything was a really great way to end the season. It was really upbeat, really made me want to get up and cheer. So yeah, I actually did really like this episode. I thought it was maybe the best season finale they've done.
Yeah, it definitely was, and I said in my review it's the most effective as a season finale, because it really tied everything together nicely. It brought back characters from previous episodes, and as you said, really addressed each of the four characters. They each had their moment, and some more than others, but yeah, it was really great character episodes for all four of them, and an episode that kind of focused a little bit more on the bridge crew than normal episodes do. And it at first I was like, did they take on too much in this episode? And then I came to the conclusion, no, it actually worked. It really did all work. And I agree with you on Rutherford. I think someone in the chat earlier mentioned that they didn't like that. My initial reaction was that, oh, that's it, because I had this vision in my mind that they were going to do an entire episode dedicated to that. But then I thought about it more. I'm like, actually, we don't really need an entire episode just for that. This actually works for Rutherford's character, and I do like that we got this season instead of just delaying it again for another season. And I'm totally fine with Buenamigo being the secret shadow person. And yeah, I also felt the same way that the Buenamigo character was kind of almost a parody of the evil Admiral Trip, especially when he was sitting there going, "No!" like going over the top evil laugh. And that was kind of before they revealed that he was the villain. I was like, oh, I guess he's the villain. I actually didn't pick up on the fact that he was going to be like evil. But yeah, and I loved. I thought it was just such a really great wrap up episode, just kind of tying everything all together from earlier in the season. And I don't think either of the previous finales did that in this way. So, so I thought it really worked really well for me. And it's another one that, the more that I think about it, the more that I really love this episode. And it's not one that, it has some funny moments. You mentioned one, but it's not one that I really think of like did I ever had to pause to laugh for several minutes? It's not one that was a laugh out loud episode, but they don't all have to be. Like, I think this works so well for all the characters. It worked so well for the story. They didn't need to do any cheesy cliffhanger at the end. And so it was just a really good way of storytelling. And I loved kind of the focus on the California class as sort of being the lower decks of Starfleet, because we come into the show thinking we're just focusing on the lower decks, but also within that, the ship itself is kind of the lower decks of Starfleet, because we've always followed the flagship of Starfleet, or this big important station where a war happens, or something really ultra important. There, it's like, you just do second contact, like the kind of the lower decks of the fleet. And so I really love the moment too when all the California class ships come together, even though totally unrealistic, but it doesn't matter. Like, I didn't care. Like, you can suspend disbelief more on lower decks than you can on other shows, for sure. But I didn't care that it made no sense that she would have time to get all of the California ships together. Like, there's no way she would have time. And did Mariner even hear that the California class was going to be decommissioned? But you put all of that aside because it was such a beautiful moment, and seeing all these characters from previous episodes come back, it was really emotional. It was really great. Loved it. But, anything else you want to add to that episode?
I don't like the character of Badgie. I wasn't a huge fan of that post-credit scene, but the way people were talking, I knew it was inevitable that they bring back Badgie. So I'm gonna try to be open-minded when they do, even though it's not something I really want. But we'll see. Maybe he'll be more interesting.
Maybe he'll team up with Artemis and Peanut Hamper.
Yes, yes, maybe.
Well, they just like AI super team. Yeah, that post-credit scene reminded me of like Superman 2, like the villains and the glass thing floating through space. But
right, yeah. But I was gonna say, like, what you just brought up about the AI supervillain team reminded me of a moment in the season that's not from one of my favorite episodes. Like, the episode was fine, but the moment was hilarious when they were going to sacrifice Rutherford and Billups to like a sentient volcano, and then there was like a supercomputer and then like a telepathic baby or something, and they were like, don't you think that's overkill?
Yeah, well, if we're done with that episode, let's go ahead and do that now. Let's talk about other moments. I already brought up the Dr. Miglaboo. I thought it was in that one episode. It's in a different episode. That was one of my favorite moments. And I do want to add that I think that they really surprisingly developed that character a little bit. I really kind of love this character. I love that he was Tendy's mentor, and even though he's not necessarily a good choice to be a science mentor since he didn't really know anything about science, I think he still ended up being, and this is another thing in episode 10, like a good mentor figure for Tendy.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really sweet, and I really did like him. So that was another great moment for me.
I will say I finally stopped hearing Mr. Peanut Butters every time he speaks.
Oh, I wouldn't see. I guess I just not as. I mean, I watched all BoJack Horseman, but I'm not as into it as you because I
Yeah.
wouldn't have even known it was the same guy until you told me. Like,
Oh yeah, that's like
I
all I
didn't
could
even.
hear at first.
Yeah, I don't even. I don't. I never. I don't hear Mr. Peanut Butter at all. But
But
uh,
he's a good voice actor though. He's a good
yeah,
comedian. So yeah. I think he
yeah.
definitely elevates the role for me.
Um, are there any other moments from other episodes or other things you want to touch on, Mark?
Um, hmm. I gotta think about that for a bit.
Well, I have one. So I'll
Okay,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Yeah, go
Um,
ahead.
I I really enjoyed it. Was the second episode? Which one was it called? The least dangerous game. Was that the
Oh,
one?
the least dangerous game. Yeah.
Was that the one with the Bold Boimler and the Wait, which one was the
Cran-
one with the Cratch who was chasing him?
Yeah, that was the least dangerous game.
The least
I
dangerous.
love I love the name of that episode because it's a play off of that novel, The Most Dangerous Game, where the guy hunts other human beings.
Oh no, I didn't. I didn't realize that. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I found that whole thing with Cratch really funny and how he's roar, chasing Boimler and he stops to see Captain Freeman. Oh, it was lovely. Thanks for the mimosas. And then when Boimler is like, "Aha! The hunted has now become the hunter," and he just like stabs him with a spear. He's like, "Let me give you a little feedback. You can't just announce that you're the hunter has become the hunter. I mean, yeah, I thought it was a great movie of that whole hunter trope. So that was another enjoyable moment for me in the season.
Mm. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I can't really come up with any sort of like hilarious laugh out loud moments. Yeah, I did kind of like the one that was it mining the mind's mind or whatever, where they were on the planet and they had this crystals that were trying to hallucinate and see people, and Rutherford had the illusion of Leah Brahms, which I thought was kind of funny, making fun of Jordy or whatever. But then when Boimler's like delusion was like, he's like, "Oh, I'm not gonna fall for that stupid shit. I'm way beyond this." And his admiral like pulls up in his motorcycle, like, "Come on, Boimler, we gotta fight the Borg and save the galaxy." He's like, "Yes, admiral, I'm with you," and jumps in the sidecar. And like Banner's just like, "Really? Even your fantasy, you're in the sidecar?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think there were some good moments in every episode except for the stupid peanut number one, which I don't like. But I think there were some. I think they all had good moments. Um, I will just kind of touch on briefly since we haven't talked about it. I did really like the Reflections episode with Rutherford. I do feel like we finally got a Rutherford episode that I don't feel like we got in the first two seasons. I do like that they subverted the trope where this is some sort of alien presence or blah 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 or whatever. That it
Yeah.
was, him, and we find out a little bit more about his past. Um, yeah, so yeah, yeah. So I think maybe what was the B plot in that? I think I maybe didn't like the
See,
B plot. Oh, that
I
was
was going to
the
mention the B plot because it reminded me of another one of my favorite moments of the season. Because the B plot was when they were Mariner and Boimler were on the
right.
planet trying to recruit Starfleet. And one of my
Yes.
other moments where I like laughed the most this season when Boimler lost his shit and started yelling at everyone. And he randomly goes up from the Wadi from the Move Along Home episode. It's like, "Stop trapping people in games!" Like that was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah, I unfortunately missed that the first time I watched it, and then when I watched it again, like I saw a review that mentioned it, and I went back and watched it again, and it's hilarious. I wish I had caught it the first time, but um, yeah,
Yeah, that Reflections episode is like the other one of my favorite episodes. I think those
yeah,
four were my four favorite of the
yeah.
season.
I really like that one as well. Um, Yeah, I just have to. This random thought. I just have to throw this out there because I mentioned this in my episode 10 review. This is not unique to Lower Decks, but I'm just still so confused how money works in the Star Trek universe. Because in episode 6, Boimler's like, oh, we don't even use money in Starfleet. And then in episode 10, this thing is funded by Picard. Like he's some wealthy benefactor. Like Picard is rich, but I thought he didn't make money in Starfleet. So I'm just so confused. How does money work in the world of Starfleet and the Federation and the Star Trek universe? It constantly
Well,
contradicts itself all
yeah,
throughout Star Trek.
they never figured that out, and that has to a lot has to do with writers. Tons of different writers coming in, and there was never a clear defined creed from Roddenberry other than they don't use money, which is very vague. And I know there's a
Yeah.
lot of DS9 writers like Ronald D. Moore would purposely mock this idea because they didn't think it was feasible, which is something I disagree with. But that was like another one of my favorite moments of the season when they were in the holodeck and Mariner was kind of making fun of a bank. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go withdraw these pieces of paper with no intrinsic value. Like, oh my god, I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
But then you're right; it's kind of undone by when they do actually mention. But then again, in that DS9 episode, Boimler was like, I have no use of Latin because I don't use money. So it's just like. I don't know. It's and then they were playing that like role playing game with Martok going, oh, you die, and they had to stop because they had to buy an expansion. So yeah, it's mixed messages. I think that is something that is always there in Star Trek.
It's always there. It's not a Lower Decks thing. It's just a Star Trek thing in general. All right, Mark, do you want to take a couple minutes to? I just kind of wanted to talk about season 4, what we hope to see, like to see, or expect to see. Do you have any thoughts before I start giving my thoughts?
Yeah. Well, just as I said, Jennifer, I don't want them to abandon Jennifer, but they need to not half-ass it. They need to go more into it. I think what we did see of it in that one episode was good. So that's why I don't think they should abandon it. I think they need to actually dive into it more because I think it'd be an interesting thing, and I think they could tie it into Mariner's character growth and character story. And I think if there was a fault of the season is that they should have touched on it more. Is that they didn't really make that like clear. And I actually kind of do want to see Artemis return, even if it's with Peanut Hamper, even if it means Peanut Hamper returning. I think I love Jeffrey Combs' voice in that supercomputer. I think that I've actually called that my favorite episode of the show because I loved that so much. So I definitely want to see more of that. And we also have this thing with William Boimler joining Section 30. He also did a very cliche evil laugh, like, like. And so I think there's a good humor to be had in that as well, kind of making fun of the evil twins trope. So that would be good. But yeah, I don't know. Like in the review I just recorded, I said I feel like they might need to promote Boimler next season. I think if anything, they could hold that off to season 5, but I don't think they can hold it off for much longer because he's like friends with all the senior officers now. So it feels like
it's going to get Harry Kim.
Harry Kim, yes, exactly. It's going to become a Harry Kim situation if they don't promote him too. But I think there would be a lot of interesting stories that they could tell within the promotion, especially if he gets a promotion, the others don't, and how that could put strain on the relationship. So I think that. And as I said, they didn't stagnate this season, but they still need to keep things going, and I think eventually they will have to do that. But yeah, other than that, like, just I don't think they should do any sort of just long-term serialized storytelling. Just do what they have been doing, having this episodic episodes and making references to previous episodes as they go in the character growth and development. So after how good season 3 is, I have very high hopes for season 4.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities between Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds in that they both are episodic, but the character growth is serialized. Like the character stories are serialized. They build off of previous episodes, which is something that old Trek didn't do as much. Some in some cases refused to do. So yeah, I would like to see that continued. I have said since last season, I think Boimler does need to be promoted. He's on track to be a captain. It's going to get a little ridiculous if he doesn't. And he actually already was promoted, but they had to he had to be demoted for no reason when he went back from the Cerritos.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but they need to promote him. And honestly, Tendi, I think all of them probably need to be promoted before the end of the show. Honestly, even Mariner, who doesn't want it. I mean, but Boimler especially needs to be promoted at some point. So one of the things I was going to say, I was looking forward to that I forgot to mention, we haven't touched on this yet, but T'Lyn finally comes in at the very end of the episode, and I'm kind of looking forward to seeing her. I loved how she's like partnered with Tendi, and she's like, "Oh, we're gonna be best buddies." Like, can we get some space here later? I don't expect her to automatically become like the fifth main character. I expect her to be sort of more of a recurring character, but I'm really looking forward to seeing her brought into the show. And I'm still confused by, like, did she go through Starfleet Academy? Because I remember at the end of Wage Duties, they were like, we are transferring you to a human ship. And I was like, can they just do that? Can they just, like, transfer them to Starfleet? Don't they have to go through the Starfleet Academy?
Well,
like,
I think there could be like a crash course version if you're already like carrier rank in a different organization. You can transfer your credentials over to Starfleet.
I guess. Stephen Kennedy says he wants a Mirror Universe episode and bring in Golden Cat. I mean, they kind of already did the Excretus where we made fun of the Mirror Universe, so I don't know. Maybe.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. That whole Mirror Universe. Yeah, I don't know. Most people are like hate the Mirror Universe, or a lot of people seem to. I don't, but I don't know. I don't think we need it in Lower Decks.
Yeah. What I would like.
I was just gonna say I think Gul Dukat's too evil of a character to have on Lower Decks.
Yeah. What I would like to actually see in Lower Decks. I just put this together. Pretty sure out of all of the Star Trek shows, including Prodigy, Lower Decks is the only one that has yet to do any time travel, time anomalies, time messing with time. I mean, not counting like in going in a holodeck and go into the Mirror, which I guess isn't time related anyways. But like they
haven't Crisis Point 2, they had that whole time travel thing, but that was in the holodeck.
That was in the holodeck. Like like actual time travel that they actually do, or just some sort of time anomaly. Because I think there's ways to make comedy out of that and kind of make parodies of previous time, which I guess they kind of did do in that episode where, but it was a holodeck. Like they haven't had proper actual time travel yet, so I think that might be fun to do. But maybe they're just gonna roll with they did the holodeck thing and that's all there is. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think there could definitely be humor out of that. Yeah, for sure. What they called but they did definitely do that in the holodeck episode with was it called a time origami or something?
Yeah, that was pretty good. Maybe that's all they need to do with time travel, actually, because that was pretty good.
I'm also surprised in all the moments we mentioned we forgot to touch on the Sulu thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I was going to mention that when I was talking about that episode, and I forgot to mention it. But yeah, that was a really great moment, and I was so happy.
So glad.
Yeah, so glad that it was George Takei, not William Shatner.
Yeah, not William Shatner.
Yeah, I just today watched the Ready Room where Jack Quaid was like, that was the highlight of my career, like getting that scene with George Takei. Like it was so special. So yeah, I can't believe we forgot to mention that. Yeah, and it was funny too. And he was just Because he was like, "Horsey, bite you now." And then he was, yeah. Anything else?
No, I think they about covered it. I was just gonna say Norman in the chat said that they could see Lower Decks having fun with the time loop. Yeah, I can see
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can definitely see that being funny. Oh, Brandon, thanks for joining us. I was wondering where you were. I was like, oh, this is so weird. Brandon's not here. So thanks for jumping in right as we were about to say our goodbyes. But good to see you. And thanks for joining Norman, Stephen, and Maddie. Great conversation going on there in the chat. So, Mark, you want to tell us what's happening over on your channel and what you're up to?
Oh, so next week, as I alluded to, I recorded my review for season 3 of Lower Decks, which I will drop next Saturday. I'm also going to drop my House of the Dragon season 1 review on Monday. And speaking of House of the Dragon on Monday, going to be doing another live discussion with Alyssa here, and perhaps even Don Willie as well. Book spoiler! So only for people who had read the books or don't care about getting that crap spoiled out of them for season 1 of House of the Dragon. So that's going to be a lot of fun, and covering Prodigy every week. And couple weeks I'm going to start laying down all of the reviews I've been recording and stacking up for the original series, where I'm going through every episode of the original series that I have yet to cover and doing it one at a time. Had to start with episodes like Mud's Women and The Enemy Within and Charlie X. God damn it. But anyway, so you can check that out over on Enchantment of Eternity.
All right. And I'm Alyssa. If you're finding me for the first time, Alyssa Jeans Reviews. And I will be joining Mark on Monday for that spoilery discussion on House of the Dragon. But also, I just dropped my own video called the House of the Dragon Book Club, where I just finally get it all out of my system because I have to be so careful about spoilers. And finally, I just blurt it all out. Very spoilery video where I go through what I think they're going to do in each of the 3 seasons, how I think they're going to divvy up the remaining story in the book. So that was a really fun video for me to make. So please check that out. I also dropped a review for Star Wars Tales of the Jedi, like something I did not think I was going to be reviewing because I didn't even know it was going to be on. Like I just turned on Disney Plus and like, oh, that's on? Okay. And now I did a review for it. So check that out as well. I don't have anything weekly happening because Lower Decks is over. I'm not doing Prodigy. I am optimistic that I'll like Prodigy a little better in the second half of the season, but I'm still not reviewing it yet. But do check out my previous Lower Decks reviews. And I got some Star Trek videos coming in November. I'm doing 2 different topics, 4 videos total of my best and worst series. So first I'm going to do the worst and then the best 10 holodeck episodes. Way harder to narrow down for the worst than the best. And then I'm going to do, at the end of November, my first overrated 10 overrated episodes in Star Trek, and then 10 underrated episodes in Star Trek. So got a lot going on my channel. So please subscribe if you haven't, and check out all of that. So Mark, if you don't have anything else to add, I guess that will be it. So thank you all for joining. Live long and prosper. Live long and prosper. And we shall see you really soon.